The day I found Patricia Harmon standing in my heated workshop, casually using my table saw like she owned the place, was the day I realized this HOA dispute had crossed a line I never imagined possible. I had moved to Brookfield, Wisconsin 3 years ago after my divorce, looking for a fresh start and a place where I could continue my woodworking business. The house came with a detached workshop that sealed the deal for me. My name is Jenkins, and at 42 years old, I had finally found a property that checked every box. The neighborhood seemed quiet, the HOA fees were reasonable, and nobody mentioned anything about restrictions on my workshop during the purchase process. The workshop was mine. I paid to have it insulated properly, installed radiant floor heating, and upgraded the electrical panel to handle all my equipment. I ran my custom furniture business from there, and during Wisconsin winters, that heated space was essential. You cannot work with wood properly when temperatures drop below freezing. The material contracts, the glue does not set right, and honestly, my fingers stop working after about 10 minutes in the cold. Everything was fine until 6 months ago when Patricia Harmon became the HOA president. She was 53, had short blonde hair with those chunky highlights that looked like someone attacked her head with a paintbrush, and she wore velour tracksuits in various pastel colors like it was still 2003. She drove a white Lexus SUV and had one of those voices that could shatter glass when she got excited about something. The first indication of trouble came in November when I received a letter stating that my workshop was technically classified as a common amenity because it was mentioned in the original neighborhood planning documents as a community workspace. I laughed when I read it. The builder had included language about a community workshop in the original plans, but that was never built. Instead, individual lots like mine got the option to add workshops to their properties. Mine was on my land, built with my money, filled with my equipment. I ignored the letter. That was my first mistake. The second letter arrived 2 weeks later, more insistent. This one claimed that since the workshop was visible from the street and exceeded the standard shed dimensions outlined in the HOA covenant, it fell under special classification. Therefore, the HOA had the right to designate its usage. I called my real estate attorney, Marcus Webb, who assured me this was nonsense. He sent a response letter explaining property rights and the distinction between common areas and private improvements on deeded land. December brought snow and bitter cold. Wisconsin winters are no joke. We were looking at weeks of temperatures in the teens and single digits. My workshop stayed at a comfortable 68 degrees while I worked on a custom dining set for a client in Milwaukee. The heating system I installed cost me $4,000, but it was worth every penny. That is when Patricia started showing up at my door. The first visit happened on a Monday morning. I was in the workshop, running wood through the planer when I saw her through the window, marching up my driveway in a pink tracksuit and white sneakers, completely inappropriate for the icy conditions. I met her at the workshop door before she could knock. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Jenkins, I am here to discuss the workshop situation." She had a manila folder tucked under her arm and that pinched expression people get when they think they are about to win an argument. "There is no situation. This is my property. Actually, if you would review these documents, you will see that the HOA has legitimate concerns about exclusive use of a structure that should benefit the community." She tried to hand me the folder. I did not take it. "Patricia, my attorney already addressed this. The workshop is on my land, built with my money, and there is nothing in the actual covenant that gives the HOA any claim to it." The covenant states that structures exceeding 400 square feet require HOA approval for construction and usage designation, which I got 3 years ago. Before I built it, her face reddened. That approval did not include excluding neighbors from access. I actually laughed. Why would it? It is my private workshop. That is like saying I need to let neighbors into my garage. This is different. Several community members have expressed interest in having access to a heated workspace during winter months. Mr. Davidson wants to restore his vintage car. Mrs. Chen does pottery and needs somewhere temperature controlled. Your refusal to share resources is creating division in the neighborhood. Then they can build their own workshops, I said, or heat their own garages. This really is not complicated. Patricia's voice rose an octave. This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude that destroys community cohesion. We are supposed to be neighbors helping neighbors, and you are hoarding a climate-controlled space while others freeze. I am running a business here. This is my livelihood. I have clients, deadlines, and equipment worth over $60,000 in here. I cannot have random people wandering in and out. She crossed her arms. The HOA board will be voting on this matter at the next meeting. We have options available to us. Good luck with that. I went back inside and closed the door. The next board meeting happened the following Thursday. I did not attend because I did not think I needed to. Marcus assured me they had no legal standing. But apparently, Patricia convinced enough board members that they passed a resolution requiring me to provide reasonable access to the workshop for community members during winter months, November through March, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekends. I received the official letter on Saturday. I immediately forwarded it to Marcus, who began drafting a cease and desist letter. But that would take a few days to file properly. Sunday morning, I woke up to the sound of voices coming from my backyard. I looked out the window and saw 3 people walking toward my workshop. Patricia was leading them, and she was carrying a key. I threw on jeans and a coat and ran outside in my boots. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" Patricia turned, and she had this triumphant smile on her face. "Providing approved community access. The board authorized me to have a key made. You broke into my workshop." The previous owner gave the HOA a spare key to all structures for emergency access. It is standard procedure. My blood pressure spiked. That key is for emergencies, not so you can run a community center out of my property. Behind her, I recognized Tom Davidson, a retired guy in his 60s who lived 4 houses down, and Linda Chen, who lived on the next street over. They both looked uncomfortable. "Folks, I am sorry, but you cannot be here," I said, addressing them directly. "This is my private property and my business workspace. I have valuable equipment and client projects in there." Tom raised his hands. "Hey man, I did not know this was going to be a problem." "Patricia said you agreed to it." "I absolutely did not agree to anything." Linda was already backing away. "I am not getting in the middle of this. Patricia, you said he was okay with it." "He is required to be okay with it," Patricia snapped. "The board voted." "The board voted on something they have no authority over," I said, "and you just committed breaking and entering. Do not be dramatic. I have authorization from the HOA board." "The HOA board does not own my workshop." I held out my hand. "Give me the key." "Absolutely not." "Give me the key, or I call the police right now for trespassing." Tom and Linda were already walking away, clearly wanting no part of this conflict. Patricia stood her ground for another moment, then turned and headed back toward the street. "You are going to regret this attitude, Mr. Jenkins." The HOA has ways of dealing with uncooperative homeowners. I went into my workshop and examined the lock. She had definitely used a key, which meant someone had made a copy at some point. I immediately drove to Home Depot and bought new deadbolts, the heavy-duty kind that cost $80 each. I installed them on both doors to the workshop, front and back. Then I added a bolt lock on the inside for extra measure. Monday morning, I was back at work when someone started pounding on the workshop door. I opened it to find Patricia, red-faced and furious, holding a key that no longer worked. "You changed the locks. This is my property. I can change the locks whenever I want. You are in violation of HOA regulations. The association must have emergency access to all structures. Then the association can request a key for genuine emergencies, and I will provide one to be held by the fire department or police, like a normal person, not to be held by you so you can run unauthorized tours. This is not over." She stormed off. The next escalation came 3 days later. I went out to the workshop one morning to find a notice taped to the door stating that I was being fined $250 per day for non-compliance with board directives and obstruction of community amenity access. I called Marcus immediately. He was livid. "They cannot fine you for this. I am filing an injunction today. This is harassment." But here is the thing about HOA disputes. Even when you are right, the process takes time, and Patricia had time and determination on her side. A week later, the temperature dropped to 8 degrees. I was in the workshop, nice and warm, finishing the detail work on a coffee table when I heard vehicle sounds. I looked out to see a small moving truck backing into my driveway. I went outside. "Can I help you?" The driver, a young guy in his 20s, looked at a clipboard. "I have a delivery for this address. Workshop equipment for the community association." "What?" Patricia appeared from behind the truck. "The HOA voted to purchase shared tools for the community workshop. Since you refuse to allow access to the space, we are delivering the equipment you will be storing." I stared at her. "You cannot be serious." "Completely serious. We have table saws, a drill press, sanders, and various hand tools, all purchased with HOA funds for community use. And I am supposed to store them in my private workshop. It is the designated community workspace according to the original planning documents, which were never implemented. This workshop is mine." "Then where would you suggest we store several $1,000s worth of equipment purchased for community use?" She had that smug look again. "Literally anywhere else. Your garage, the community center, a storage unit. Those are not climate controlled. This equipment needs to be protected from temperature fluctuations." The driver was looking between us, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I just need to know where to unload this stuff. I have 2 more deliveries after this." "You are not unloading anything here," I said. Patricia pulled out her phone. "Then I am calling the police. You are refusing to accept delivery of community property. Call them, please. I would love for the police to explain property rights to you." She actually did call. An officer arrived 20 minutes later while we all stood around in the cold. The driver was particularly annoyed. Officer Reynolds listened to both sides, looked at the workshop, checked the property lines on his tablet, and turned to Patricia. "Madam, this is private property. He does not have to accept delivery of your items. But the HOA regulations state that community property must be stored in appropriate facilities, and this workshop is listed in the original community plans." "Original plans that were not executed," Officer Reynolds said. "This is a structure on his private lot. Unless you have a legal order stating otherwise, you cannot force him to store your equipment." Patricia's face went through several shades of red. "This is absurd. He has a heated workshop sitting empty half the time while community members freeze in their garages." "It is not empty. I work here every day," I said. "And it is not a community facility. Officer Reynolds looked at the driver. "Sir, I would suggest you return these items to wherever they came from or find alternative storage. There is not going to be a delivery here today." The driver nodded and started closing up the truck. Patricia was shaking with anger. "This is not finished, Mr. Jenkins. Not even close." After they left, Officer Reynolds gave me some advice. "You might want to document everything. Take pictures, save all letters and emails. HOA disputes can get ugly." "I am starting to see that." He left, and I went back to work, but I was unsettled. Patricia had shown she was willing to push this to bizarre extremes. That night, I got a call from my neighbor, Steve Paulson, who lived directly across from me. "Hey Harold, I wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia came by earlier asking questions about your workshop. How often you are there, whether you have clients visiting, if you are running a commercial business from a residential property." "What did you tell her?" "That I mind my own business and she should too, but I think she is looking for angles to come after you." "I appreciate the warning. Also, and I am probably not supposed to say this, but my wife was at book club with Patricia last week, and Patricia was ranting about you. She told everyone she was going to make sure you regretted not being a team player. Just watch your back." Over the next few weeks, I received 3 more violation notices. One claimed my workshop generated too much noise, despite the fact that I only worked during reasonable daytime hours, and my nearest neighbor was 100 feet away. Another stated that the workshop's exterior color was not in compliance with the approved palette, even though it was the same dark gray as my house, which had been approved. The third claimed I was running an illegal commercial operation from a residential property. That last one actually had teeth. I did run my business from home, but I had all the proper licenses and permits. However, the HOA covenant did have restrictions on business operations. Marcus and I had to go through my entire setup and demonstrate that I was in compliance with both municipal and HOA regulations. It cost me another $2,000 in legal fees. January brought more cold. The temperature stayed below 20 degrees for 2 straight weeks. My workshop was my sanctuary. I would get my coffee in the morning, walk out the back door, and spend the day in comfortable warmth, creating furniture that people paid good money for. Then things got weird. I came home from running errands one afternoon to find the equipment truck back in my driveway. But this time, nobody was around. The truck was just parked there, blocking my garage. I called the company name listed on the side. They told me they had been contracted to make a delivery to my address, but the customer had not arrived yet to unlock the location. I told them I had not ordered anything and to remove their truck. They did, but it was clear Patricia was playing games. The next incident happened 3 days later. I was working in the workshop when I heard scraping sounds at the back door. I opened it to find Tom Davidson trying to break the lock with a screwdriver. "Tom, what the hell?" He jumped back, looking guilty. "Patricia said you were keeping community tools in there and refusing to give them back." "What community tools? I do not have any community tools. Everything in here is mine." "She said the HOA bought equipment and you were holding it hostage." "Tom, think about this logically. Why would I have their equipment? They tried to deliver it and I refused. Remember," he looked confused. "She showed us receipts, said she confirmed delivery to this address. She lied. Now get off my property before I call the police for attempted breaking and entering." He left, but I was shaken. Patricia was now actively lying to neighbors to justify actions against me. I called Marcus again. "This has to be harassment. She is manufacturing a narrative that I stole HOA property. Write down everything with dates and times. If she keeps this up, we can pursue a restraining order." That night, I installed a security camera system around my workshop. 4 cameras with night vision, motion detection, and cloud storage. They were not cheap, but I needed documentation. The cameras paid for themselves within a week. At 2 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, I got a motion alert on my phone. I pulled up the camera feed and watched as Patricia and another person I did not recognize approached my workshop carrying bolt cutters. They went to the back door and started trying to cut the lock. I called 911 immediately, then threw on clothes and went outside with my phone recording video. They heard me coming and ran, but not before the cameras got clear footage of their faces and the attempted break-in. Officer Reynolds responded again, along with another officer named Martinez. I showed them the video footage. Both officers looked disgusted. "That is definitely attempted burglary," Martinez said. "Do you know who the second person is?" "No, but I know Patricia Harmon. She is the HOA president and has been harassing me for months about this workshop." They took copies of all my documentation, including the previous incident reports, violation notices, and the video footage. "We will be having a conversation with Miss Harmon tomorrow morning." "Is this enough to press charges?" "Absolutely. This is criminal activity, not a civil dispute." I barely slept that night, running on adrenaline and anger. The next morning, I saw a police car pull up to Patricia's house, 6 doors down. I was not proud of it, but I watched through my window as 2 officers spoke with her at her door. The conversation got animated. She kept pointing down the street toward my house. Officer Reynolds called me an hour later. "Mr. Jenkins, this is more complicated than we thought. Miss Harmon claims that the workshop contains HOA property that you have been refusing to return. She says she was attempting to retrieve stolen community equipment." "I do not have any HOA property. They tried to deliver equipment that I refused to accept. It never entered my workshop." She is claiming otherwise. She showed us receipts for thousands of dollars worth of tools purchased with HOA funds and a delivery confirmation to your address. My stomach dropped. She faked a delivery confirmation, or she had them deliver it while you were not home and you did not notice. "Officer, I am in that workshop almost every day. There is nothing in there that is not mine. You are welcome to search it. We might take you up on that. This situation requires documentation to sort out." An hour later, 3 officers arrived to do an inventory of my workshop. I opened both doors wide and let them document everything. I had receipts and purchase records for all my major equipment going back years. Every tool, every machine, every piece of hardware was accounted for as my property. The officers took photos and notes. Officer Reynolds looked around carefully. "Mr. Jenkins, there is definitely no new equipment here that matches the descriptions on Miss Harmon's receipts. Everything appears to be well used and consistent with your documentation. Because I am telling the truth. I never accepted delivery of anything from the HOA. Then where is their equipment?" "That is an excellent question that you should ask her. It turned out Patricia had a storage unit." When the police investigated further, after getting a warrant based on potential fraud, they found the community equipment still in boxes in a storage facility she had rented using HOA funds. She had purchased the tools, never actually attempted real delivery, and then fabricated the entire story about me holding them hostage. The equipment was not even appropriate for woodworking. She had bought automotive tools, apparently for Tom Davidson's benefit, along with a pottery wheel and kiln for Linda Chen. She had been using HOA funds as a personal shopping service for people she wanted to impress or recruit to her side. The district attorney got involved. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and removed Patricia from her position. The forensic accountant they brought in found additional irregularities. Patricia had been using HOA funds for all sorts of unauthorized purposes. The workshop equipment was just the tip of the iceberg. But before all that got sorted out, Patricia made one final, desperate move. It was mid-February, one of the coldest nights of the year. The temperature was projected to hit -5 degrees with wind chill pushing it to -20. I went to bed knowing my workshop heating system was running efficiently, maintaining that comfortable 68 degrees. At 4 a.m., I woke up to security camera alerts. Multiple people were approaching my workshop. I grabbed my phone and saw Patricia, Tom, Linda, and 2 others I did not recognize converging on my property. I called 911 again while pulling up the camera feeds. They were not trying to break in this time. They were carrying bags and boxes. I watched in disbelief as they started unloading equipment outside my workshop doors. Table saws, the drill press, boxes of hand tools, the pottery wheel. Everything from the storage unit just piled in the snow outside my workshop. They were creating a scene, making it look like I had locked them out of the heated space and forced them to leave expensive equipment in the freezing cold. I was already on the phone with the 911 dispatcher. They are staging equipment outside my workshop to make it look like I am excluding them from shelter. Officers are on the way, sir. Do not confront them. But I went outside anyway, staying on my porch where the cameras could see everything. Patricia, what are you doing? She turned, and even in the dim light from my porch, I could see she had been crying. Her voice cracked when she spoke. You have left us no choice. We purchased equipment for community use with community funds, and you have locked us out in the freezing cold. We are documenting the abuse. That equipment was in your storage unit. The police know that. We are bringing it to the designated community space, as we should have done initially. Your refusal to open the doors on the coldest night of the year shows exactly what kind of person you are. It is 4 in the morning. This is insane. Tom looked uncomfortable. Patricia, maybe we should wait until morning like we discussed. No. This needs to be documented now. The equipment is being damaged by the cold because of his selfishness. Police cars arrived, 3 of them, lights flashing. Officers Reynolds and Martinez were there, along with officers I did not recognize. They took in the scene. The equipment scattered in the snow, Patricia and her group standing in the freezing cold, me on my porch. Officer Martinez approached Patricia. Miss Harmon, what are you doing? Documenting the exclusion of community members from a community facility. We have equipment that needs climate-controlled storage, and Mr. Jenkins has illegally locked us out. We discussed this. This is private property. The original community planning documents designated a community workshop. This is that workshop. Officer Reynolds had apparently had enough. Miss Harmon, you are on private property without permission at 4 in the morning, creating a disturbance. I need you and your group to leave immediately. We have a right to access community facilities. You have a right to leave before I arrest all of you for trespassing. Linda spoke up. Patricia, you said this was legal. You said we were just documenting. It is legal. We are exercising our rights. Miss Harmon, Martinez said firmly, you need to collect your equipment and leave this property now. Consider this your final warning. Patricia stood there shaking from cold or anger or both. Fine. But this is not over. The lawsuit will show everyone what kind of person Harold Jenkins really is. They loaded everything back into the vehicles they had brought and left. The officers stayed to take my statement and review the camera footage. This is escalating dangerously, Reynolds said. She is becoming unstable about this situation. What can I do? File for a restraining order first thing in the morning. We will be recommending criminal charges for tonight's incident as well. This has gone way beyond a civil HOA dispute. I did not sleep the rest of that night. I sat in my living room, watching the security cameras, drinking coffee as the sun came up. Marcus filed for an emergency restraining order that morning. The hearing was scheduled for 2 days later. In the meantime, I had a police incident report documenting Patricia's behavior, security footage, and a growing file of evidence showing months of harassment. The restraining order hearing was surprisingly quick. The judge reviewed the documentation, watched key video clips, and granted a temporary restraining order without hesitation. Patricia had to stay at least 500 feet from my property, but the legal system was just getting started with Patricia Harmon. The district attorney filed formal charges: attempted burglary, trespassing, harassment, and fraud related to the misuse of HOA funds. The HOA board, now operating under new leadership with Vice President Roger Mills as acting president, conducted a full audit. Patricia had misappropriated over $40,000 in HOA funds over 2 years for unauthorized purchases, personal expenses charged to the association, and questionable contracts with companies owned by her relatives. The criminal trial happened in April. I had to testify about the workshop situation, the harassment, the attempted break-ins, and the final incident where she staged equipment in the snow. The security camera footage was damning. Her own text messages and emails, obtained through discovery, showed she knew she had no legal claim to my workshop, but was pursuing it anyway out of spite. The fraud charges were even clearer. She had falsified board meeting minutes to show authorization for purchases that never happened. She had written checks to herself disguised as contractor payments. She had used HOA credit cards for personal shopping. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on multiple counts of fraud and misappropriation of funds. The burglary charge was reduced to attempted criminal trespass, but she was convicted on that too, along with the harassment charges. Sentencing came in June. The judge was not sympathetic. Patricia got 3 years in state prison for the fraud charges, plus restitution to the HOA for the full amount of misappropriated funds. The other charges added another year. She would serve a minimum of 2 years before parole eligibility. The day of sentencing, I was in the courtroom. Patricia looked diminished somehow, smaller than the force of nature who had invaded my workshop 6 months earlier. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she stood and turned to face me. I just wanted the neighborhood to come together. I wanted us to be a community where people helped each other and shared resources. You ruined that. The judge cut her off. Miss Harmon, you committed fraud, harassment, and attempted burglary. You created a false narrative to justify criminal behavior. Mr. Jenkins protecting his property rights is not the issue here. Your criminal conduct is. She went to prison. The HOA dissolved the ridiculous fines they had levied against me. Roger Mills, the new president, actually apologized on behalf of the board. We should have recognized what was happening earlier, he said when he came to my house. Patricia was very persuasive, but we should have done our due diligence before supporting her positions. I appreciate that. I just want to be left alone to run my business. Understood. And for the record, the board has formally recognized that your workshop is private property with no community access requirements. We have updated our records and covenant interpretations to be clear on that. Life slowly returned to normal. Tom Davidson apologized for his part in everything. Linda Chen sent a card. Several neighbors who had been cold to me during the dispute came around to say they had not understood the full situation. My workshop remained my sanctuary. I upgraded the security system and kept the good locks. On cold winter mornings, I still walked out my back door into that comfortable 68-degree warmth and created furniture. The custom dining set I had been working on when this all started finally got finished and delivered. The client loved it. The HOA equipment that Patricia had purchased sat in the storage unit for months, until the board finally sold it at auction to recover some of the lost funds. The proceeds went toward repairing the association's financial damage. I settled into a comfortable routine. Work in the morning, client consultations in the afternoon, occasional deliveries of finished pieces. The harassment stopped. The violation notices stopped. Life went back to what I had hoped for when I moved to Brookfield, a quiet place to work and live. Steve Paulson became a good friend. We got beers sometimes and talked about how crazy the whole situation had been. My wife still cannot believe Patricia went to prison over a workshop dispute. It was not really about the workshop, I said. That was just where it manifested. She had control issues and was committing fraud. The workshop was an excuse. Still, what a mess. Yeah. The following winter, when temperatures dropped again and my workshop stayed warm, I thought about everything that had happened. About how a simple property rights issue had escalated into criminal charges and prison time. About how someone could become so fixated on controlling something that was not theirs that they would destroy their own life in the process. I also thought about the legal bills. Even though I won every dispute, even though Patricia went to prison, even though the restraining order was made permanent, I was out over $15,000 in attorney fees, security equipment, new locks, and lost work time. The HOA eventually reimbursed me for some of it from the recovered funds, but not all. Marcus told me I could pursue a civil lawsuit against Patricia personally for the remainder, but what was the point? She was in prison and would be paying restitution for years. I would just be another creditor in a long line. Some battles you win, but they still cost you. I tried to focus on the fact that I had my workshop, my business, and my peace of mind. That had to be enough. One day in December, almost a year after the worst of the harassment, I was working on a custom bookshelf when someone knocked on my workshop door. I opened it cautiously, still wary after everything, but it was just Roger Mills holding a plate of cookies. My wife wanted me to bring these by. She is on a holiday baking spree. He handed me the plate. Also, I wanted to let you know the board voted to remove all that nonsense about community workspace from the planning documents. We are doing a full update to the covenant to prevent this kind of interpretation problem in the future. I appreciate that. And we are implementing better financial controls. Multiple signatures for purchases over $500, monthly audits, transparent accounting. What Patricia did should never have been possible. How is the association doing financially? Recovering. We settled with the insurance company, recovered most of what she spent, and we are rebuilding the reserves. It will take a couple years, but we will be fine. After he left, I ate a cookie and went back to work. The bookshelf was coming together nicely. Cherry wood with dovetail joints and adjustable shelving. A client in Madison was paying $3,000 for it. This was what I wanted. This was what I had fought for. The right to work in peace on my own property with my own equipment in my own heated workshop. The workshop that Patricia had demanded access to remained locked and private. The tools she claimed were suffering outside in the cold had never been mine, had never been in my space, had been part of an elaborate fiction she created to justify her criminal behavior. The heated workshop stayed at 68 degrees. My business thrived. The neighborhood moved on. And somewhere in a minimum security facility in Wisconsin, Patricia Harmon served her sentence, hopefully learning that you cannot demand access to what is not yours. You cannot commit fraud and harassment without consequences, and you definitely cannot break into someone's property because you decided it should belong to the community instead. My workshop, my property, my rules. It really was that simple, even though it took months of harassment, police reports, security cameras, legal fees, and a criminal trial to establish something that should have been obvious from the start. I finished the bookshelf in January and delivered it personally. The client was thrilled. I came home, parked in my driveway, walked past the workshop where all the drama had originated, and went inside my house. Through the window, I could see the workshop lights on, the heaters keeping everything at perfect temperature, ready for tomorrow's work. It was mine. It had always been mine. And now everyone, including the legal system and the HOA, agreed. Sometimes you have to fight for what is right, even when the fight costs you time, money, and peace of mind. Sometimes standing your ground against unreasonable demands is the only option, even when it escalates beyond anything you imagined. But in the end, justice prevailed. The person who committed crimes went to prison. The HOA reformed. The neighborhood learned from the experience, and I kept my workshop, my livelihood, and my property rights intact. That was as much of a happy ending as I could ask for, even if the path to get there had been far more difficult than it should have been. The locks I changed stayed changed. The heated space stayed heated, and nobody ever demanded access again.